This is KCBD News Channel 11 at 10.
Day 2 of the Lubbock Hollis Daniels capital murder trial ends in suspense. Testimony today led jurors to just hours before the fatal shooting of Texas Tech police officer Floyd East Jr. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. And before we move on, we want to say it's good to be with you tonight, and thank you very much for your patience.
Yes, we also want to say thank you to our team of operators and engineers who worked hard for hours this evening to solve the problems that kept our news off the air at 6. Now, our top story tonight, state prosecutors continued down their witness list this afternoon, showing why they believe Hollis Daniels should receive the death penalty.
KCBD News Channel 11's Case Wilbanks was in the courtroom again today. And Case, who did jurors hear from today?
Karen and Abner, we heard from former friends and roommates of Hollis Daniels, as well as a Lubbock police officer and a Texas Tech police officer who interacted with Daniels. We also saw those moments on video, leading to some emotional moments in the courtroom today. Wearing the same suit they'd come to use to identify him in the courtroom, Hollis Daniels sat silently Tuesday as former friends and roommates told the jury of his drug use, thoughts of suicide, and the night before the shooting of Officer East. The owner of the gun Daniels is accused of taking testified about the argument that ensued that night at his Central Lubbock home and the threats he made of fighting dirty. A former Lubbock police officer was called to the stand to walk the jury through the video from his body camera and patrol unit that captured his detainment but not arrest of Hollis Daniels after leaving the home. Daniels is patted down but refuses a search of his vehicle and is later let go, named a suspect for that stolen gun. Two of Daniels' roommates in the Talkington Hall dorm testified of his suspected marijuana use, and in the early morning hours of October 9th, hearing a gunshot from Daniels' room, electing to inform Tech PD the next day. One roommate said he confronted Daniels that next afternoon as he was led inside his room and saw the gun and where the bullet struck. He says Daniels said it was an accident and apologized. District Attorney Stanek questioned the director of Texas Tech Counseling about the crisis line communications initiated by Daniels' mother after hearing from a friend. Concerned of suicidal thoughts and the stolen gun he was suspected to have, claims a counselor said he denied, but talk of a welfare check went up to the assistant dean of students. Based on the roommate's report to police, including Officer East himself, a welfare check did occur at Talkington. An officer who participated testified about it and the body camera video that captured it. Officer East is seen among those who searched Daniels' room, finding drugs but only what they called a pellet gun. Daniels eventually appears as the search is underway, falsely identifying himself as a different roommate. Knowing he may have a weapon and who he really is, an officer pats him down, which is demonstrated for the jury, saying he couldn't have missed the .45 caliber stolen weapon. Instead, he finds mislabeled Xanax. Daniels sits on a couch in the dorm questioning the legality of the search, claiming he knows nothing about a gunshot and fears being taken to jail. And that's where that video ended today. The state asked the Texas Tech police officer if he believed Daniels knew what was going on, was fully aware of the situation, and the officer agreed with that. Now, as for that video that was shown, it was visibly upsetting to some of the members of Officer East's family who've been inside the courtroom. Some of them actually had to step outside in the hallway while that video was shown. And we do expect that testimony to pick back up tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I'll be joining my colleague Shaylee Sanders as we continue our coverage. Karen and Abner.
Thank you, Case.